Okay, guys, I just got back from an anime convention the other day, and as we all know, every time you go to an anime convention, you level up your nerdiness a little bit, so I think I've achieved a new ability. I'm gonna call it the Tekking Tornado! Alright, we're not gonna be using the Tekking Tornado very often in the future. Okay, I knocked some stuff over. Okay then, so as you can see, I got a new wall scroll back here. I got a few of them from the con, so it's more like gathering research purposes than anything. Do you go to anime conventions for business or pleasure? Mine is both. Anyway, you can see back here that this is a wall scroll primarily featuring Boa Hancock, her siblings, Luffy, and Amazon Lily in the background. Now you might be thinking for a second, well, that's all well and good, Matt, you know, boobs and all, but how much traction do you really gonna get out of that wall scroll? I mean, you know, 3 out of the 4 characters aren't even relevant to the current storyline. Oh, I'm sorry. 4 out of the 5 characters on that wall scroll. I was excluding Salome there, you know, Boa Hancock Snake. We need to remember him, okay? 4 out of the 5 characters on there aren't even relevant, so... You know, how many videos could you possibly use this? Oh, don't worry about that, kids. Don't worry about that. We have plans. Okay, then. So, with this video series, we're gonna kick off discussing the islands in the One Piece world. One of my favorite videos I've ever done on this channel was the video where I discussed the One Piece world, like all the geography and everything of it. And I didn't go into each, you know, individual island because, you know, that video, just for brevity's sake, that video would have been like 6 hours long if I went into every single island. But every island in One Piece is unique. Oda has a very interesting way of portraying them. Sometimes he takes references from real-life countries or islands and incorporates them in some way. Sometimes he takes references from mythologies and throws them in there. A variety of mythologies too, from, you know, many different cultures. You know, and then on top of that, you also have the Straw Hats running around and causing ruckus on certain islands as well. And so a lot of, you know, really famous battles occur on these islands. So I thought, okay, let's go through each island, or at least all the major ones in the series, and talk about those. And I decided to start with Amazon Lily, not just because of alphabetical sake, but also, you know, I get to talk about Boa Hancock's personality again, and that's always good. And, you know, more than anything, I just kind of, like, miss those characters a little bit. I think that it would be cool to see them again, like Margaret and all the Kuja. But probably going to be a little while before we get to see those characters again. But here we are, so let's just get into it. So let's start off on the location of Amazon Lily. Well, it's located in the Calm Belt, which is not necessarily in the Grand Line or in the Four Seas. The Calm Belt is sort of like a border area that Oda necessarily had to create, because the whole premise of the series, you know, it starts off in the East Blue, and Luffy wants to gather a group of pirates together to go into the Grand Line where Goldie Roger purportedly hid his treasure, and they talk about the Grand Line as this, like, mystical place, this pirate graveyard where all this great treasure lies, but also your doom as well if you're not careful. And so many people question, like, okay, well, why can't you just, like, sail into the Grand Line, and if it gets too tough, you could just turn right back around into the East Blue? So Oda necessarily had to create some type of border wall to prevent you from just sailing in and out of it at will, and hence the Calm Belt. So there are 4 Calm Belt seas in the world, and they stretch from one end of the Red Line to the other, and they're basically on the north and south perimeter of each half of the Grand Line. So there's a Calm Belt on the north and south sides of Paradise, and also on the north and south sides of the New World. And while you're inside the Calm Belt, there are no storms, there's no ocean current, there's no wind, so you can't propel your ship, and most of the ships at this point are sailing vessels, so, you know, you have to figure out some way to propel your ship under its own power, or by just rowing really fast. That's the only way you're going to get through the Calm Belt. And that would be dangerous enough, because just imagine being in a ship that can't move out in the middle of, you know, you're stranded out in the middle of the ocean. You would eventually run out of supplies and die of just starvation or dehydration. But even to, you know, increase the stakes a little more, this is also a nesting ground for sea kings, which are the giant Leviathan-sized sea monsters that exist in the One Piece world. So you really don't want to stay there longer than you have to. Now, the exact size of the Calm Belt, we don't exactly know how, like, wide it is, like how long this strip of this ocean is. It goes from Red Line to Red Line, but, you know, how far is it from, like, Paradise to sail through the Calm Belt back into the East Blue or something like that? And it is possible, because we've seen this with Don Krieg's crew. Don Krieg had this huge pirate armada, I think something like 50 ships and like 5,000 men. He went into the Grand Line, and they made the mistake of disturbing Mihawk while he was taking a nap. Don't do that. And yes, Mihawk did screw over a big chunk of their ships, but I think the vast majority of the damage, because when we see Don Krieg's crew after they arrive at the Baratier, they are wiped. The only ship remaining is their flagship, this giant galleon. It's destroyed, just wrecked. All of the members of their crew, like massive amounts of people, are dying of starvation on the crew. Not even close to 5,000 men from what they started with, so I would like to think the vast majority of that did not come from Mihawk. I think Mihawk just got kind of, he got annoyed that they woke him up, and he might have sunk a few of their ships and kind of put the fear of God into them, and was like, okay, we're getting the hell out of here. But I think the majority of that damage came from coming through the calm belt and stuff, just like rowing their ships through it, and by the time they got done, I mean, they managed to get free, but just one ship, their flagship, and it was just like just barely, and they were near death at that point. So don't screw with the calm belt. Also, the location of Impel Down, the government's greatest prison, that's in the calm belt, and it's a perfect place to put a prison because, you can't just sail away, and also Sea Kings are like a natural defense mechanism, so that's very useful there. Now, it's for those reasons that most islands in the calm belt, they don't get a lot of traffic, and they're usually just deserted, like Ruskaina, the island where Rayleigh taught Luffy about Haki. There was a civilization there a long time ago, but they just couldn't survive. And because it's so hard to get supplies to those islands, really only special circumstances, like you have Impel Down, which is a government facility, and they have like the tub current and stuff, and the marine ships have propellers and ways to get there. But most other islands in the calm belt, aside from like Amazon Lily, are that's kind of the exception to the rule. Most of them are not getting traveled to very often. So Amazon Lily is located around, I think, 10 days travel from Impel Down. This is where Luffy got sent by Kuma after the Straw Hats got separated. Amazon Lily, as the name suggests, is primarily an island that's filled with a jungle. There's one major city there. The city doesn't really have a name. The name of the island and the name of the city are both Amazon Lily there. As for the namesake of the island itself, I always assumed that, Oda just took like, oh, okay, it's like the Amazon rainforest, and because all the Kuja, the women of the snake, the members of the tribe of Amazon Lily, they're all named after flowers, I figured the name would be a flower as well, so he's just like Amazon rainforest and then Lily flower, and then that's where he got the name. There is an actual species of flower that's like literally called the Amazon lily, so there you go, kids, okay? So the Kuja are the tribe of women that live there. Men are forbidden on the island. This is a trope, this is kind of an idea I think we've all heard about before, the idea of a tribe filled with nothing but women. If you're a fan of the DC comics, Wonder Woman and the Amazons, those are kind of, indicative of that. It stretches all the way back, though, to Greek mythology, so I had to bust out the books again, and the Amazons were, I believe, the daughters of Ares and Harmonia, who was a nymph of the forest, and there was also a goddess of harmony, Harmonia, but that wasn't her. I think there was like just a nymph of the forest, and Ares got together, and they had a bunch of girls, and because Ares is the god of war, the women loved warfare, and they were referred to as like the slayers of men, or those who loathe men in Greek. Probably the most famous thing that happened to the Amazons was in, yes, we're doing history time with Tekking, shut up. Probably the most famous thing that the Amazons did in Greek mythology was they were one of the targets of Heracles' labors. So the 9th labor, he had to go get the girdle of Hippolyta, who is the queen of the Amazons, and Hercules almost, I mean, it was a really easy labor at first, but like most of the labors, like if those of you that read Greek mythology, you kind of already know this, Hera is kind of a cheating bitch that every time that she sends, Hercules out on a quest and he's like about to finish it rather easily, she's like, oh, hell no, no. So she turns into an Amazon and pretends that like, oh, he's trying to kidnap the queen, stop him, kill him. So I think they had to slaughter, like Hercules and Theseus, I think they had to slaughter like a lot of Amazonists, including the queen as well, but they got the girdle at the end of the day, so yeah. It's an interesting story, except you get to the weird parts in the tale, like, oh, okay, well, Oda was obviously basing the Kuja off of the Amazons from Greek mythology. Oh, that's a cool little reference there. Yeah, something else the Amazons also did in Greek mythology, though, was lop off their right breast so they could, hold the bows a little better, without it being encumbering. So, yeah, that part doesn't really make it into the One Piece story as much, but it's those little moments that you're just sitting there reading it like, oh, what the hell? Okay. But anyway, yeah, that's where the Amazon, thing comes from. My favorite rendition of that trope, though, is, and the funniest by far, is the one from Futurama. You know what I'm talking about? Death by Snoo Snoo. Yeah. So, the Kuja don't adopt the death by Snoo Snoo dogma of their tribe. However, they do despise men, and the only time that they're allowed to really interact with men is when they go out into the world in order to get pregnant, in order to continue the tribe's, the longevity of it, okay? And every baby that's born in the tribe is female. Just that's just how it goes. There's really not an explanation for that. Every child born of a Kuja is just female, so that makes it easy there. I believe the Amazons in the Greek myth, I believe whenever they did have boys, they always sent them out to be adopted, and they would only tolerate men for the sake of getting pregnant so they could have children. That was the only reason. So while on Amazon Lily, you can enjoy many amenities here. The city is designed with ancient Chinese architecture. We have a palace where the Empress resides. We'll get to that in a second, of the entire hierarchy of the culture and who rules over it and how all that works. The little that we know about it. We also have a battle arena, because you can't have an awesome jungle tribe without a freaking battle arena, complete with spiked pitfalls straight out of Mortal Kombat. I'm sitting there why are those there? And then you think, about the culture of Amazon Lily. Is there, a monthly death battle where they have to, all right, whoever gets knocked into the spike, it's a death match. That's how it is. And I think the only reason it's there is because they don't encounter men very often on the island. I would assume every now and then the Kuja pirates would bring back, captured pirates that are men, or maybe they would have some fun with them, and just maybe, send them into the battle arena to fight for their enjoyment, because that's what they did with Luffy. And you could tell from the setup that that's probably not the first time that they've had a man, fight to the death against that giant panther or against the other Kuja. They've probably done this at least before a few times. Or every now and then maybe a man will get shipwrecked on the island without being devoured. If they're lucky enough to manage to survive the calm belt's lack of wind and ocean currents, if they're lucky enough to not get devoured by a giant sea monster, they make it to shore of Amazon Lily, and they're like, okay, we made it. Oh shit. And they get thrown into the battle arena, and they have to have the spikes there, because it's all right, well, whenever a man does show up, we have to make them crap their pants before we kill him. Basically that's how it goes. You have to get a little bit of entertainment out of it. So as for the culture of the Kuja tribe, and side note, I looked it up. I really couldn't find Kuja, what it actually meant, so I think it's a word that Oda just came up with. The closest I could find in Japanese anyway was Kujaku, which means a peacock. So I don't know if it's just a word he took from another culture or if he just made it up because it sounded cool, whatever. The Kuja tribe, the way Oda describes this is that strength is beauty. Right, and the way he represents this is on the island is you have two members of the Kuja squaring off in the battle arena, just having a friendly match, Pansy and Poppy. And Pansy was a smaller woman that was drawn more in the typical Oda style, hourglass figure, and Poppy was this giant, the death by Snoo Snoo kind of. And we just see a Poppy just decking Pansy right in the face, and that's how he's strength is beauty, yes! So that's how that goes there. So the strongest member of the tribe is also the most beautiful. Hence, that might explain why Hancock is always, everyone goes gaga over Hancock. Maybe a little bit there. But that's their general layout there. They're very much isolated from the rest of the world for most of their history. The island has been around for a long time. There's a long line of empresses that have ruled over Amazon Lily. However, the times are a-changin' because the Marines are coming up with better equipment, and Vegapunk invented the Sea Prism Line ships, so now the Marines can sail through the calm belt easier than they used to. It's still kind of dangerous because they have the propelling system in order to get them through the calm belt. However, even though the bottom of their ships are protected with Sea Prism stone, and it appears to be just invisible to the Sea Kings at first, the Sea Kings can still spot them if they're not careful. If you're on a battleship sailing through the calm belt, the Sea Kings can't spot you underneath the water, but if the Sea King were to pop out of the water and be sup, shit, so it's still not, it's not an easy, 100% you're gonna get through the calm belt unscathed. You really have to be, careful when traveling through there, unless you're Momonga, because then in that case you could just carve those sea monsters up like a chicken goose. That was an awesome scene. I want to see more Momonga. But, yeah, and by the way, in case you're curious on how the Kuja get around, the Kuja have a special pirate ship that's being pulled by the Yuta, where there's these giant, venomous water snakes that have, manes of hair. And they're you know how how, like, certain animals in real life have, like, a certain coloring, like aposematic coloring that allow them to let, you know, predators know, like, hey, if you eat me, I'm poisonous and you're probably gonna die. Same basic deal here. Even the sea kings stay away from these things because just by the sight of them, and like maybe they get one look at their hair or their eyes or their color or the goofy grins that the snakes always have on Amazon Lily. They always have that expression. Same thing with Salome. Boa Hancock's personal snake always has that, like, goofy, happy expression. Even in the middle of, like, a massive war at Marineford, where Salome is just watching, like, death, destruction, pirates slaughtering Marines, Marines slaughtering pirates, blood everywhere, bombs going off. Salome's just taking all that in with smiles and cheer. Right, so with that being said, let's talk about snakes. Now, no, not Snek. That's somebody else altogether. We're gonna wait in the One Punch Man video for him. No, snakes. That's what I meant. Yeah. So as you could probably tell, snakes are a big deal on Amazon Lily. Made kind of obvious from just looking at the island with the giant 4 monolithic snakes staring out to sea, ready to inject venom into any of the enemies of the Kuja. Yeah, those things kind of instruct some snake aesthetic. These might be some people that worship those things. And in terms of, like, a religion, okay, once again, you carve giant snakes into a mountain of your island, so there might be some snake worship going on here, but it's never actually referenced in the story. We don't really get to see them, like, bowing down before the great serpent or something or anything like that. But snakes are a big deal. There's snakes found all throughout the island, and most of the Kuja, pretty much every single tribeswoman, except with a few exceptions here, all have a snake companion. So I'm assuming that, like, maybe at a certain age, it's kind of like a Pokemon thing, where either they get to choose their starter snake, or the snake gets to choose them, and that snake is kind of with them throughout their lives. They can kind of control snakes, or, like, they're on a certain, like, level of understanding with them in their culture where they could use them for things that snakes aren't usually used for. Like, whenever Luffy was captured, did they tie him up with rope? No, they tied him up with snakes. The snakes just listened to their command, like, tie that man up, and the snakes went and tied Luffy up. And then when they, like, okay, let him go, and they would just slither away. The snakes are also used as bows for the Kuja, so maybe a certain type of snake that has, like, an iron hide or something, because the snakes can actually stiffen out to the point where they can be, used taut as a bow that the Kuja use in combat. Now, interestingly enough, the only exceptions I found to this snake rule are actually the Boa siblings. Now, obviously, Boa Hancock has Salome, but when it comes to her 2 sisters, Boa Marigold and Boa Sandersonia, who, by the way, Sandersonia, obviously Hancock is the hottest, but Sandersonia, I don't know. I mean, yeah, the giant bobblehead is kind of like a turnoff, but I mean, she's got a rockin' bod. You gotta admit that. You have to admit that. I'm not continuing the video until you admit that. Type it right now. Sandersonia's hot teching. Okay, I get it. Yeah, she's great. She's green hair all over the boobs. Yeah, okay, great. Okay, we good? You typing it? You clicking comment? Okay, good. We can continue. So when it comes to the 2, the first time we get introduced to them, Boa Hancock has Salome, Boa Sandersonia is accompanied by Bakura, the giant panther, and Boa Marigold is accompanied by a hawk who we never see again after this. So I actually, yeah, is it on here? Yeah, Marigold's hawk video. We're doing a video about that damn hawk. What the hell is your story? Don't hawks fight against snakes? I can imagine, like, hawks, I'm not a biologist, I don't know everything about this, but I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that, yeah, hawks will eat snakes in certain circumstances, just coming down from the sky, grabbing a snake, and I guess at that point it's just a battle of which kind of snake it picked up and what angle it picked up the snake at, and just biting it in the middle of the air and digging its talons into it. Damn nature, you scary. But bottom line, we're figuring out what's up with this hawk, okay? And we never see the hawk again after that. Bakura does make another appearance. Bakura was like the first challenge that Luffy had to face. Kind of his own trials, like Hercules had to deal with, if you might say. When Luffy got captured, thrown in the battle arena, you had them, they just kind of like wrote him off as just like, okay, man, you will now die, whatever. And Boa Hancock is there, just bored out of her mind, like, I can't believe I have to do this shit today. Alright, stick the panther on him. He just uses his Conqueror's Haki to, like, scare the panther, and then everyone's just like, okay, this is, Alright, he knows Haki. We should probably, try to figure out some other way to take him down there. So that's the situation there with Bakura. And probably the reason that Marigold and Sandersonia do not have a snake familiar is because they both have the abilities of zone snake fruits. Marigold can become King Cobra model snake fruit, and then Sandersonia has the Anaconda model snake fruit, I believe. And so they don't need it because they already have, snake powers of their own. Right. So, with that being said, that's pretty much when it comes to their cultures, how they deal with men. Now, it's acceptable for the Kuja to go out into the world and, just meet men to get pregnant and then come back. But it's a big taboo, as you could probably imagine, for a Kuja to leave the island, for an extended period of time and then live with a man or live in the outside world. This is their tradition, and it's even hard for an empress to break this tradition, okay? So it's something that's kind of ironclad here. For instance, Granny Neon, who used to be an empress of the island a few generations before Boa Hancock was, she decided to leave the island to meet and live with a man, and she did so for a great number of years, and eventually she returned. Maybe her husband died or something like that. She eventually returned to the island, and she was allowed to stay, but she was kind of like excommunicated from the main tribe, and she was like forced to live in a house on the outskirts of the village because she broke the cardinal rule. Even if she herself was an empress that led the entire island at one point, she still, was not excluded from this. Maybe if she wasn't an empress, they would have just killed her or just would have chucked her out of the island. But because she was an empress, maybe they allowed her to stay in exile. Now, the reason that Neon left is actually a really good one. She didn't just leave just to forsake the tradition. She left because there's actually a disease that kind of runs in the lineage of the empresses on the island, and we don't really know if the empress thing is like hereditary, if it works with like kings and queens, if like Neon is Hancock's grandmother or the previous empress was Boa Hancock's mom. We don't know exactly how that works, but they were all empresses, and all the empresses seem to come down with a thing called the lovesickness at some point. Because love is a hurricane! No, we're not doing that again. So basically, when they fall in love with a man, and they don't leave the island, they stay there to, be with their people, they'll eventually come down with this love sickness, and it'll eventually kill them. This happened to the previous empress before Hancock. It happened to Neon, but Neon managed to survive by going out there and living with her husband for a few years before returning. And then this, of course, happened with Hancock regarding Luffy. And so Hancock managed to avoid this as well by leaving with Luffy and spending time with him. Didn't really have much of the love sickness is kind of weird, because it's just like, okay, how much time do you need to spend with your loved one? Because she only spent like a week with Luffy while traveling to Impel Down, and then after that they really didn't get to see each other much. They got to see each other a little bit during Marineford, but that was in the middle of a giant battle. And when he came back to Amazon Lily for a few weeks to recover, but Luffy was mostly in a coma that entire time. Oh my god, can you imagine the things Hancock must have done to Luffy while he was in that coma? Like, she snuck behind, she snuck into Law's submarine every now and then. It's like, Luffy, my darling. Okay, but anyway, yeah. But then after that, Luffy goes to Ruskaina for 2 years. They get to see each other very briefly after that, and then Luffy just heads back to Sabaody, and they don't get to see each other again. So, I don't know. She's cured, I guess, but I don't know. The previous empress did not do this. She chose to stay on the island, and then she ended up dying, so that sucks there. Another reason why the, Kuja might not like men all too much, and this has been something that's been around for hundreds of years, so it's not all because of this, but remember, the current empress of the island and her sisters, Boa Hancock, Sandersonia, and Marigold, they were actually captured by the world government at one point. And they were taken to Marijois, and they were used as slaves by the Tenryubito, and they were eventually freed by Fisher Tiger, and, they returned to Amazon Lily. Probably, I don't want to go into too much detail with this because it's a really dark subject matter, but, being enslaved, and it's talked about that they were, force-fed their devil fruits in order to be entertained by the Tenryubito, by, who are mostly men. You can probably imagine some other kind of dark shit that happened to them while they were, enslaved at Marijois that I really don't want to go into here, that might have a little bit more of a distaste for men in their eyes. So that, coming back to Amazon Lily, Boa Hancock is now the Empress, probably also would, lend to why the Amazons of Amazon Lily probably would also, that would probably also lend to why the Kuja don't like men very much. And keep in mind, the majority of the Kuja have not even ever, seen a man before. Like, Luffy arriving on the island was, one of the first times they ever saw a man. There's the Kuja that live on the island that just kind of keep the upkeep and everything, and then there's the Kuja pirates. Those are the ones that are led by Hancock and her siblings, and Ran is also a member there, and they're the ones that head out to sea to actually, the against pirates and procure certain, foodstuffs and supplies for the island, and then, negotiate with the Marines when they have to before returning to Amazon Lily. So the Kuja pirates, they get to see men all the time, so they're used to it. But most of the Kuja that live on the island don't get to see them. Some other things just about the island in terms of like its fauna and flora and stuff like that. There's snakes, obviously. There's also giant boars that Luffy ran into. Most of the island, aside from that main city, is just a jungle. So you got to worry about a lot of dangerous plants and fungi, like those mushrooms. There's a variety of different mushrooms on the island. Luffy ended up eating one that ended up sprouting all over his body, and that, you know, could have possibly killed him if he wasn't rescued at the right time. And the mushrooms were all pulled off of him, and something else was almost pulled off of him as well. So, yeah, that's a little dangerous thing about the island. When Law and the Heart Pirates arrived, because after the war at Marineford, they had to take Luffy back to Amazon Lily to recover, and Law was there with his pirate crew, who are mostly men, and then Jinbei was also there, and they arrive, and Granny Neon, I think this was only in the anime, but it really does speak to the traditions of the island, right? Luffy is kind of an exception, because they just love the rubber bastard, right? And Hancock kind of fell over, you know, head over heels in love with Luffy. So they can leave an exception for Luffy. But even in these dire circumstances where Luffy is, like, in a coma, severe, like, he was burned by magma, for God's sake, you know, and Law is helping him out, trying to heal him. You know, he's in the submarine, he's all hooked up to all this medical equipment and everything. Neon is like, we cannot allow these men here. There are plenty of doctors on Amazon Lily, we'll be fine. And Law just kind of, like, he doesn't even yell or anything. He just kind of looks at Neon, he's just like, that's fine, but do you have the same equipment on this island that I have on my submarine? I mean, I've been looking around, and I'm seeing you guys still use, like, sticks a lot here for your buildings and stuff. Like, do you guys have a respirator? Or IV to get fluid into him? Because Luffy cannot breathe on his own right now. So, I mean, like, he's very passive-aggressive. He's like, I'll hand him over to you, but his wound's open, he's probably gonna die, and I don't know, you could stack some sticks and mud on him if you could try to heal him, I don't know. So, he's not quite that condescending, but basically. And, Neon is basically like, okay, fine. You could dock your ship at the rocky coast, it's far enough inland that the Sea Kings won't bother you there, and it's like this perimeter into the actual island proper. You have to stay off to this, like, side, but you'll be fine there. So even in that situation, there's, like, this, like, tradition that they have to uphold. They just can't let, like, a bunch of men into the island at once. That's a big no-no. So that's the situation there. Oh, and one more thing about their culture. One more thing is Haki, right? So the Kuja are some of the first groups of people in the One Piece world to actually show off armament Haki. Now, armament Haki was shown before this. This was at the point of the story where Oda was really pushing the Haki thing, like, as, like, hinting at it, not expressly, like, showing it off all the time. And this was before we had the whole, like, vulcanization, like, when you use Haki, it makes your arm go black or whatever. This was before we had that, but we had it obviously at Skypiea. That was observation Haki. The first time Luffy used his conquerors was against Duval's giant boar thing, his bison. And when he arrived on Sabaody, of course, we had Sentomaru use his armament Haki. But the Kuja were, like, the first to actually exhibit putting Haki into the arrows. And, you know, Margaret fired off an arrow at Luffy. Luffy dodges it. Arrow hits a rock. The rock explodes. And Luffy's like, man, that was a strong arrow, but it looks like the same as any other arrow. And Margaret spoke about Haki as if, like, it was just a common thing on the island. Like, of course, it's endowed with Haki. And is like, oh, I don't know what that is, you know? So that was, like, exhibiting, like, okay, Haki, whatever this concept is, because we didn't really know what it was at that point, Haki, whatever it is, can be incorporated into projectile weapons and then fired at your opponent. Okie dokie, that's something good to know. Now, one of the last things I want to discuss here is the whole deal with the Empress of Amazon Lily and their current relationship with the Marines and the world government. Here's a question for you kids. Is Amazon Lily allied with the world government? Now, that's kind of a tricky question, because at first you want to say yes, because Boa Hancock is a warlord who is with the Marines, and the whole reason that the Marines even allow the Kuja to do their kind of thing is because they're allied with the Marines, which means she's allied with the world government. But then you want to say no, because Amazon Lily is out in the middle of the sticks, essentially, in the One Piece world, out in the middle of the calm belt. They have their own culture. They have their own currency called the Gore. Don't believe we've ever seen it. I don't know what the exchange rate is with berries, but they have their own, like, isolated government and their isolated currency and all that kind of stuff on the island. So the best way I can describe that is they're not allied with the world government. Not in the same way that, like, Alabasta or Dressrosa is, okay? Basically what it is their kind of relationship is sort of like, it used to be completely separate because you couldn't get to Amazon Lily anyway. You know, attacking the island was very impractical, but with the increase in technology, that relationship had to change. So Boa Hancock became a warlord when she was very young. She was only 18 when she became a warlord. She's one of the younger warlords right now. Most of them are in their 30s or 40s. I think Moria is even in his 50s, but, well, Moria is no longer a warlord, but you know what I mean. Most of them are, like, older, and Boa Hancock right now is only 31, and she was 29 before the time skip, but she's been a warlord for, I think, one of the longest times. Like, when she was first introduced at age 29, she was a warlord for 11 years at that point, so it's a long time. And, I think it's more of just, like, you know, if Boa Hancock was not a warlord, the Kuja pirates would be considered a threat, and now that the Marines have this kind of technology, they would just probably just... Because the Kuja have no other island. That's their home island. All it would take is, like, 1 or 2 Marine battleships to go to Amazon Lily, you know, and bombard it, Buster Call it out of existence, and what would the Kuja do? There's nowhere else they could go. So that's all it would take. So that's why Boa Hancock had to become a member of the Warlords. But also... You know, there's people in the Marines and the world government that view pirates as pirates, regardless of whether or not they're warlords or not, like Isho, like Fujitora. A pirate is a pirate. I don't care what title they have. I don't care if they're legal pirates or what. They're still pirates. So, yeah, the world government probably does not view Amazon Lily as just, like, that's their ally. More of just, like, they're neutral right now. They're kind of have, like, a give-and-take kind of relationship. And you can't even say the same thing for Dressrosa, because Dressrosa was also led by a warlord, Doflamingo. But the difference there is that Dressrosa was a member of the world government before, long before Doflamingo was ruling over it. And even after Doflamingo got dethroned and got put into prison, Dressrosa, now led by King Riku Doldagan, is indeed still part of the world government. Amazon Lily, for hundreds of years, was not part of the world government, and they only started getting involved with the outside world up until recent years when technology began to develop a little bit more. So yeah, I think that's their current relationship there. And also, with the history that Hancock has with the Tenryubito and the world government, she would never actually, like, given her personality also, even if it meant, like, possibly the destruction of her island, she would not bow down to the world government and listen to what they had to do. Even in the situation with the war, when she was being called to Marineford, and Momonga showed up and just like, if you don't show up, we're going to revoke your title and we're going to attack your island. Even then, Hancock was like, bring it on. I'm beautiful, so, you know, and then, you know, she was basically asking for the thunder there, and she's pretty confident, and the Kuja are very strong warriors, but I'm just saying, like, they have one pirate ship. They have exactly one pirate ship. Granted, it's pulled by 2 very highly venomous snakes. Granted, the Kuja are great warriors, and they have Haki and all that stuff, but... the Marines send, like, a fleet of, like, a few battleships to surround that island and just bomb the shit out of it. There's nothing they can do about that. So Boa Hancock really was kind of an idiot there, and it wasn't, of course, until Luffy showed up and, you know, she fell over head over heels in love with Luffy that they were able to, you know, figure this out, and then Boa Hancock agreed to go to Marineford. But if that wasn't the situation there, if Luffy never showed up, Amazon Lily might not be around right now. They might have just removed Hancock from the roster of warlords, and they might have just cut their losses and just destroyed the island and just not deal with them anymore after that. So, Luffy kind of saved the island, if you really think about it in that sense. In terms of everything else, I mean, there's not a lot about their culture that we know. You know, I'm thinking maybe, like, there's, like, some kind of, like, I'm sure there's probably some kind of ceremony, coming-of-age ceremony on the island where you get your snake partner. How does the whole Empress thing work? How does it get passed down? Is there, like, a moment where, like, they have to take out, like, you know, snake blood or something, and Boa Hancock had to put it over her face, like, I am now the new Empress! Or something like that. There's, like, giant fire in the background. I'm imagining this as being very theatrical. Kind of Temple of Doomish, you know? So, yeah, we don't know much about that, or their culture, or religion, or anything like that, or maybe lack thereof. They are rather superstitious, and they're part of those tribes that don't even know what devil fruits even really are. Because when Luffy was discovered on the island, he was stretching. They had no idea what that was all about. They just assumed that all men were able to stretch, just like they assume that all men have, like, family jewels. Well, they do, but, you know, not that kind of jewel. And with the case with Boa and her siblings, when they have devil fruit abilities, Boa Hancock has the love fruit, and her sisters have zone snake fruits. I guess I should say snake zone fruit. I guess that makes more sense. But they don't know they're devil fruits. They just think they're curses. The curse of the Gorgon is what they called it. So that's and of course the Gorgon is also a reference from Greek mythology, which is the creature that's able to turn other beings into stone by its glare. But yeah, that's the situation there with the curse of Gorgon. And I think the Kuja still have no concept of what a devil fruit is. I don't think anyone really ever told them. So they're still kind of in the dark about that. But once again, they're on their little isolated islands, so most part they don't really need to worry about that kind of stuff. They don't really have to worry about getting invaded by pirates or anything. The only thing you have to worry about is the Marines, really, and as long as Boa stays in good contact with them, they should be good. I hope they show up again in the story. I'm looking forward to seeing Boa Hancock again, obviously, and Sandersonia. So that would be neat. But anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. This is the first kind of thing in a new series I'm doing. I'm thinking about just calling it, geography is... Finish the sentence, kids. Multiple choice question. Okay, geography is A, everything, B, some things, C, Mr. Peanut, or D, a magical giraffe with wings that plays rugby. Okay, put your answer in the comments below, and I'll grade the test, and I'll get them back to you next class period. Okay, thanks for watching, everybody. Let me comment also on what islands you would want me to discuss next. Obviously, I'm going to be discussing, like, Alabasta, Dressrosa, Water 7, all the big ones, but whatever order I'm doing it in, I don't know. So just let me know about that. All right, you guys have a good one. This will be Tekking101 signing out. Later, everybody.